Next, we have Kristin Feeney Kostka. She's a data science lead for Converge Health, which is a division of Deloitte Consulting. She specializes in clinical data science for real-world evidence generation and translational research. Kristin's most recent work focuses exclusively on using artificial intelligence to better clarify patterns of disease. Since 2015, Kristin is the self-appointed and still uncontested Global Odyssey lead for Deloitte involvement. She is also a perennial member of the Symposium Planning Committee.
Thank you, Melanie. So, I have a confession to make. I actually plagiarized this presentation from all of you here in this room. We are part of a village, and by sitting in this room, you are now a member. I'm going to tell you a bit about our tribal history and a little bit about the process that we have that you may not even realize how innovative it is. So I want to ask you a question. How long is too long? How short is too short to do research? Don't go somewhere else with this question. I have to disclaim, I'm here wearing my Odyssey hat, and I am a human, so therefore I am totally likely to be biased in what I'm about to present to you. And I've already drank the Kool-Aid, so if you're not already part of this community, well, join me in this journey. We have some benchmarks on what normal looks like. And it's a Sisyphean task, our favorite, right? It's like rolling a rock uphill. Our friends at the Sentinel Initiative have done a great job showing us what we can do when we move to a simple descriptive analysis or a complex descriptive analysis all the way through to an L2 inferential analysis. And the time on average that they reported in some of their benchmarks was 50 days, with the majority of that being spent on study planning. Now, to move L1 and L2 in total, the range gets even longer. And these are for somewhat comparable tasks, somewhat comparable drugs. It just shows you that we spend a lot of time thinking. But there really is a point of diminishing return. Why do we do this to ourselves? In economics, this is a popular thing to show up, but for some reason, we forget this in clinical research. I want to challenge us to think about breaking our problems into smaller problems. Because when we think of things in software development, like the waterfall to agile, we can break these down and we can accomplish things in shorter amounts of time. We did this year, some of you know. We hosted the face-to-face study-a-thon. We came around this idea of generating reliable evidence for one clinical problem. Our colleague Bridget Wang presented this on a community call. There's a wonderful amount of information about it. I'm not going to talk about that science. I'm going to talk about all of the pieces that came together and the process that we adhered to. Because a study on studies is just as important as the study itself. I know that sounds a little bit like I said the word study 300 times, but wait for it. It gets better. We take for granted that there is quality, accuracy, and reproducibility in this process. And we need a better job of documenting the baseline perception of what normal is today as we continue to evolve this community. So I did just that. I turned my lab of people at Columbia into a cohort that I studied. And I took some baseline perceptions. Some of you answered this survey. It was a pretest. As they started the study-a-thon exercise, as they went off and marched into their groups, whether they were T, C, O, negative controls, we wanted to know the average time to complete an observational study that they had done previously, huge range of time. And we see that on average, at least half of that is spent on planning. Is that too much time? Is that enough time? I don't have a great answer, but I challenge you to think about it as we go through this. There was some confidence in the quality of the study, and a little more in the expertise of their colleagues. And it was shared across the board. The representativeness, the robustness, the reliability, somewhat confident in something that might have taken 1,200 days of their life. Seems a little crazy. After the 2-day exercise where we went heads down and answered that question, I surveyed these people again to see if maybe they felt a little differently. And I actually did get people to consent to this so I could report on their information. We had 8 people who reported this was the first time they ever did this. Maybe I shouldn't have asked them their opinion in the first place, but it's good to know that we had newcomers. We see even after completing an exercise like this, 75% of the people in that cohort still could barely agree on what a reasonable amount of time was, even though they had been part of an exercise to turn it on its head. We see that 12 researchers attempted to execute the study package, and attempt is a pretty important word here. And I will come back to this in a moment, but it's important we acknowledge it's an attempt. And as you might expect, people actually felt pretty confident about robustness, repeatability, having the expertise on hand. And why is that? Probably because they knew there was more data available to them than they might have in their own house. We can see that in general, people were very likely to want to recommend this to other people to do. But they also acknowledged they might not be able to do it where they are today. They might need to work on some change management to influence others who aren't as new to this process. What are the key takeaways? Well, I'm just going to be totally honest. We didn't actually finish. I finished my study on studies, but some of the artifacts of the other study to be completed. And maybe that's okay. Maybe 48 hours is a little too aggressive to go from study conceptualization to publishing in New England Journal of Medicine. But Patrick, I still think you're right. I still think it's doable. I mean, look at those negative controls, man. We could do this. But we need to do more characterization of the contributing data sources. Andrew is hosting a great data quality workshop. Maybe you're signed up, maybe you're gonna sneak in, but people are challenging the data that contributes to these studies. But we know that there are axes here that we're measuring on, and we can see comparable evidence. My colleagues before me presented wonderful examples of larger populations consuming less resources. I believe Ross just said it took them a day. A day! How incredible is that? I remember watching code run in grad school and being happy with 30 minutes of like one line of code running. So I give you credit, Ross. I'm positive you had more than one line. And I will totally admit that we are already in a place of becoming where we believe in these ideas. And so I might just be surveying people who already bought into the change. But great minds tend to think alike. If you haven't seen this, you should. Our friends at Flatiron did something very similar and came to similar conclusions. 48 hours was too short a time for them. They did a couple of months, but they came to a similar point. Our villages are starting to redefine the paradigm, and it's because of villages like ours that we are moving this forward. So thank you to everyone who is doing this, because the process is just as important as the research.
All right, that concludes our lightning talks for this afternoon. Another round of applause for everybody that came up and spoke. I encourage everyone to stay for the networking reception and meet up with these speakers to collaborate and further the work of OHDSI. Thank you.